What is up, JL Life? Modell here. In today's video, we're going to be going from lip balls to stiff balls. Ball joints, that is. Stay tuned. So what we're going to be installing today are upgraded ball joints from Dana Spicer. I'm not going to lie to you. This should have been included with the stock axles, but it wasn't. These were the ones that were included. This one's not too bad, but this one, I mean, your ball joints should be holding stiff. And the reason why the ball joints in the JL and the JTs to this date are so flimsy is because Dana used plastic for the internals of the ball joint, so it leads to very quick wear. And I'll be quite honest with you, Dana, you screwed that one up. Anyways, they're trying to make things right. There's no aftermarket ball joints available right now. We've already replaced one set of ball joints on Heathen. However, they were the OEM ones, and we just bought one side because we didn't want to spend a bunch of money on both sides. They finally improved the design. The new ball joints come with a grease zerk fitting, and on the innards, it's metal on metal, so it's going to hold up a lot stronger. As you can just kind of see, yeah, these suckers ain't moving by hand. That's going to translate to an awesome ride. Like this one, like I said, this is not the worst one, but very easy to move. Well, to get this job done, you're going to need a ball joint press, a breaker bar, and the socket to fit the jack screw at the end. The reason why we replaced Heathen's ball joints earlier in the year, Heathen was having death wobble. We had checked everything else. The ball joints didn't feel that bad when you tried to test the ball joints on the Jeep. It was the only thing that we could think of. It was only triggering on the passenger side, and we needed ball joints, and there was no aftermarket available. So we bought more OEMs, and we swapped them out on the passenger side. The death wobble stopped. These ball joints I'm showing you are actually taken out from that time. Misty started driving again, and she was not dealing with death wobble. A month or two, then death wobble started coming back, but this, instead of triggering when the passenger side was hitting something, it was triggering on the driver's side. So we suspect it to be the other half of the ball joints. And I mean, ball joints are going to wear the more aggressive you will, and of course Misty drives a lot more than me, which is probably why her ball joints have gone bad. Nobody's coming out with aftermarket ball joints. It was just the Dana aftermarket, same pieces, overpriced same pieces, but finally they've improved the design. As I said, metal on metal innards, grease fittings to help prolong the life of the ball joint. Stay tuned. Chock the wheels. So while the Jeep is on the ground, break all of your lug nuts, and we're going to need to break this guy, the spindle nut. The spindle nut helps hold the axle shaft in. It takes a size 36. It's a lot easier with a breaker bar. Real quick. So I'm all about doing things safely when you're working on your Jeep. That's why I had the jack stand, put the tire under the frame just for that extra protection. I don't put myself underneath the Jeep unless I need to put myself under the Jeep. As I was putting at the end of this video, or when we were done filming the video, I realized I screwed up. Don't do what I do. When you put the jack stand under the Jeep, make sure you lower the jack down. There's probably about half inch gap. No, it would have broken my leg if anything. Mistakes happen, but that's also why I'm redundant with the safety, the tire under the frame, and why I don't put myself under the Jeep. I figured I'd just put this out there now before someone sees it and try to hide it from you guys. Mistakes happen. I didn't die. Got the install done. Yeah. It was redundant. And even if it did fall, if the jack failed, it only would have fell like, did I say failed? Failed. Well, it would have dropped about a 1/4 inch and hit the jack stand. If that failed, it would have landed on the tire. And if that failed, I wasn't under it. So the hardest part about doing ball joints is just getting to the ball joints and disassembling everything that's in the way. So we're going to start deconstructing everything. We're going to start by removing the brake caliper. It's 2 bolts. It's this one, and there's a second one right down here.
Ta-da!
And it's a 21. So after removing the bolts, grab the caliper, kind of pull it in towards you just to kind of help compress the caliper so it slides off easily. And then you're going to need to be careful not to stretch the brake line, and we're going to need to set this out of the way. Next piece we're going to be removing is going to be the rotor. And you're going to need a torque bit to take out this little retainer bolt. It's going to be a size T30. After getting the torque bit removed, just grab the, should be able to grab the rotor, and it might be stuck on there. There we go. There. Pull it all off. Set that aside somewhere where it's not going to get scratched. And man, this is just muddy.
Oops.
The next piece we're going to want to remove is going to be the dust shield. It's going to be a size 10. There's 3 bolts. 1, 2, and 3. Set those bolts aside. Pull your dust shield out. Set aside. Next thing we're going to need to do is remove the ABS sensor. But before we do that, we want to clean up all this mud because we don't want mud getting down into where the tone ring's at. A little bit of brake clean just to help get all that dirt and grime out of there before you crack it open. Nice. So after making sure all your brake clean is picked up, we're going to be removing the ABS sensor, size 5 Allen key. There is some blue thread lock on it, so it'll take a little bit to take it off, not too much. Once you get that bolt out, slowly kind of finagle the ABS sensor out.
Gently.
Nice and gentle. You don't. The ones on the JK are horrendous for braking when you take them out. The JL is a much better design.
Ask us how we know.
Ask me how I know. The next thing we're going to be removing is going to be the unit bearing. Now, you have 3 bolts on the back end, and you're going to need a 12-point socket or wrench to get it off. On the back side, you have these 12-point head bolts. 1, 2, and number 3 should be right back here.
I don't know if I'm getting it or not.
Take those out.
There it goes.
If your unit bearing doesn't just come out with pulling on the sides, you can get a screwdriver and gently start prying. Until you're able to pull that out. Set aside. Take your axle shaft, give it a tug. Gently pull that out as well.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
We're going to need to replace those soon. All right, so the next thing we need to remove is going to be the knuckle. Depending on what side you're on, the driver or passenger, you're going to want to remove, to make things easier, you're going to want to remove the steering. course, this is always a good time to clean up parts that are covered in grease, mud, and rust. So finally, once you got your steering and your drag link, depending on which side, once you got all that done, we can finally start getting to the ball joint. Your ball joint is this one and this one, and it's connected to the C bracket on your axle, and it goes into your knuckle. So to remove it, you got these cotter pins going through the ball joint on top and bottom. We're going to need to remove those using a pair of pliers. Do your best to straighten them out. Remove your top. After getting that removed, we can drop the castle nuts. There's not a lot of torque on these, so there we go. Because there is a sleeve on the top, I leave the castle nut on the top nut, and I drop the one on the bottom, and you're going to get a hammer and start hitting in this flat area until it drops. We already did this before we started. We sprayed down the joints up here and up here with WD-40, hopefully to make this break a little bit easier. Careful not to hit areas like right here. Of course, your brackets, your lines. You don't want to break something. There we go. After that, you can finish dropping the castle nut, and the knuckle will drop. And here's that sleeve I was telling you about that goes on the top side of the ball joint. And we want to get this all nice and cleaned up. Brake cleaner. This is the easy part.
How wiggly are they?
If you don't know how to use a ball joint press, I'm going to leave a link to a video to a YouTuber who did a fantastic job explaining how to use a ball joint press. They can be a little confusing if you're not used to them. We're going to be pressing them down. Both of them go down. So I've seen people do this with an impact wrench. Sometimes you can get away with using the impact wrench to do it, but it's not always the best way to do it. The best way to do it is going to be with a nice strong breaker bar. And the top is pressed out. And then we'll do the exact same thing. And just like the top, breaker bar, nice, slow and controlled. Definitely want to clean the mating area for the ball joint and the C bracket. You don't want dirt in there. You don't want grime in there. What I like to do is just take just some automotive grease, real thin layer on the inside. Nothing excessive, just kind of help things go smoothly for top and bottom. So when you order the kit, it comes with 2 different ball joints. They might look similar, but they're different. The easy way to tell them apart is going to be the grease fittings. The one that's flat is going to go on bottom, and the nipple is going to go on top. And we're going to press them in, going from the opposite way which we pressed out. We're going to be pushing them up. So we're going to get our cap on top. We're going to get our fittings set up here. Just important reminder, when you are pressing in, just make sure the stud can go all the way through. You don't want to be pushing on the stud. You're going to be pushing on the collar on top of the ball joint. And you also want to be careful, you don't want to be putting pressure on the top, and that's what this little cap's for. It's going to rest up here, so when it does press through, it's going to not damage the grease fitting. And the hardest part about using one of these presses is just getting everything to line up together. And it's not hard pressing in, it's just there's just a lot of pieces you got to hold together all at once. And from here, tightening. So just make sure you're paying attention here. Make sure the die adapter does not slip over the collar of the ball joint. If it does, just restart it. So while you're pressing it in, just be very careful that's going in straight. I'm using the size number 4. It does bite the lip as long as it's centered. And you go until it stops. You want to come down here and you want to look at the collar and make sure it's seated flush all the way around. This does not have a C-clip like older models of Jeeps. It just presses in, and then we will do the top. Just like the bottom, you're going to go until it stops. And make sure the collar is seated all the way to the top. The top is slightly recessed inside. As you can see, it should all sit flush with the C. So before I finish buttoning all this up, I'm going to grease these. As I'm sure they are greased, we're just going to add some more. So the bottom one, if you're wondering what kind of grease fitting do you use to grease that up? Well, it's going to be one of these. And you just go to it, you push down on the ball bearing, and we'll just do 2 squirts. Boom. So now we're going to start putting everything back together, but before I do, I'm going to do some spring cleanings type of stuff. And when anytime you're taking things apart in your Jeep, it's always a great time to start cleaning things up. If you notice when you're taking off your rotor, your unit bearing, things get seized up. It's usually due to all the rust, and more areas where you get a lot of rust, this becomes a lot bigger of an issue. So it's more important to make sure you're doing maintenance. Wire brush, a drill, and just clean off the surface of rust. Don't forget the inside where it mounts to the unit bearing. And just be careful not to breathe in the rust. Obviously, rust ain't going to be good for your lungs. And next thing, we want to just clean up the unit bearing. We are ready to reassemble, starting with the knuckle. Do not forget that sleeve. So the sleeve goes on top. There's only one way it will fit. As you can see, the flat end will go up against the flat surface of your knuckle. And you're going to rotate both into place and up. And a very important part when you're putting the knuckle back on is making sure the preload on your nuts are correct. Now, when I tell you the torque settings, you're not gonna believe me, but they're pretty light. The proper procedure of doing this, according to FCA, is by torquing the bottom one first to 15 pounds. We'll torque the top one to 55 pounds, then we will go back to the bottom one and torque to 35. is not a lot. You're going to move to the top knuckle, top side of the knuckle. I'm going up to 55. I'm going to go ahead and put the steering back in place before I finish torquing the top. Let me go back to the bottom. 35 pounds. There you go. So when you go to line up your cotter pin, and if the castle nut is in the way, what we need to do is make it tighter. You never loosen a castle nut to get the cotter pin to fit. Always go tighter. And slide that bad boy in. Bend the back side around the castle nut, so that way your nut doesn't back out. All right, guys, so the ball joint install is all done. As I was sitting there editing everything and watching all the putting back together, it just seemed very redundant and repetitive, and it didn't really seem like it was adding any value to this video. So I'm just going to cut it all out and just kind of put this here. Take your time, tighten everything, and if you need help on how things need to go back together, just rewatch the video and do it backwards. Real quick, we want to talk about the difference between the ball joints in the OEM and the upgraded parts from Dana. So yes, they are an upgrade. I'm just, I'm a little upset about these new ones. Should have really been the design in the axles from the get-go. Yes. But Dana decided plastic internals in the ball joints, and they did the same thing for the tie rod, drag link. That plastic was the better choice. Well, problem with plastic, it wears a hell of a lot quicker and makes things loosey-goosey really fast.
Weight savings.
The French, you say?
I said weight savings.
Weight savings. They got a whole, quarter of a gram out of the damn thing.
Gotta make weight.
And you can't even argue that the metal ones are cheaper. The plastic internal ones, what was that? It cost you $300 for two?
No, it was $2 something.
It's more expensive than the metal ones. You don't even get to make that argument. Granted, the JL ball joints already are really pricey. You go and you'll look at the JK prices and you'll go,
yeah,
you're paying for really research and development from the guys who already did all the research and development developing the axle. You start to get kind of why I'm a little like about it. But anyways, these ball joints, again, I will say they are a huge improvement. So with like the OEM ones, when we got new ones, because we replaced one half of them already, because there's nothing else available, but you were able to move them. I mean, granted, these ones are used, but out of the box, we were able to move them by hand. The new ones, you couldn't do that. It was very stiff.
Yeah, yes. I couldn't bend the new ones at all.
So, I mean, that in itself is obviously a huge upgrade. And, of course, adding the greasers to the ball joints will help prolong the life of your ball joints. Just make sure you're
greasing them regularly.
Greasing them. You don't grease them, then it's pointless, and it's still going to fail prematurely.
Like a fancy lift.
What?
That has grease fittings.
Oh, yeah.
Grease it.
You got to grease things.
It has a grease fitting, grease it regularly.
The next thing, the reason why we're replacing ball joints is because Heathen, Missy's Jeep, had death wobble, and she's had death wobble for a while, and it was just trying to figure it out was just kind of
irritating.
It was really irritating because we have the 1-ton steering from Synergy in her Jeep. We have the rock crawler control arms. We have the TerraFlex heavy duty track bar that's in there. You know, all the normal things that cause death wobble were replaced. First, when she
alignments and all that good stuff.
and the caster and all that good stuff. Well, when she was first getting death wobble, it was only triggering on the passenger side when she was driving. We checked the ball joints. The ball joints did not feel that bad, but
we felt like they might have been a little bit loose, but not loose enough to where it would cause death wobble.
We get them replaced, and it fixed her death wobble. We had to replace them with the OEM ones, the plastic internals, because nobody else is freaking making the ball joints at this time. 4 months ago. But we only bought half of them because we didn't want to waste the money for that. We were hoping aftermarket would come in and fill the void. You know, a couple months later, she started getting death wobble on the other side. You know, finally, someone put out some upgraded ball joints. Dana, though I'm a little irritated with you, thank you. It's about time. When Dana and FCA got together and they designed the JL, they redesigned the axle, and this is to include the ball joints, which is why no one's making ball joints for it yet. And that itself is kind of strange because the JL has been out for 2.5 years.
Yep.
Crazy, huh?
Well, late 17.
So if you're having death wobble issues and you can't find it, it may be the ball joints. Like I said, her ball joints did not seem bad, and replacing it with these new ones, her death wobble's gone. She's hitting trigger spots and nothing. But guys, I hope you find this video useful. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for the next one. Also, I want to give a shout out to another YouTube channel, which I know we don't do too often. But this guy right here, Project Napalm JL. His name's Clint. He's a really good guy. He has his own YouTube channel. He's kind of small, but he's entertaining. And I recommend you guys go watch him. I'll put a link here. Maybe here. Link. But until the next one, y'all keep it easy.